or Calero drinking.
At the public.
Maybe we should have done it at a bar.
Yeah, then you never would have showed up.
Always get a better turnout there.
You'd have a
Nobody
cocktail.
would have listened. Well, we're the people that care anyway.
Yes.
We care for
We're on
one
the
block
good
and two
input.
block here.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it. We are here to talk about the Neighborhood Roads Program, as you all know. I'm sure you are all pretty familiar with it. We're going to discuss the different kinds of improvement, your options, the different roads that they're going to be working on, and of course the project features. Brett will tell you all about that. This public meeting is one way for us to get your feedback, which is what's very important to us. So we want your feedback. We want to know what your thought process is, what you think the best choices are. We also have a hotline, which there's some agendas out there on the table if you didn't pick one up. There's a hotline. We also have a website and Twitter, so you can always go there, see what's going on, what the latest information is. And so that hotline is your contact number. And then we have some of the main key players here, key contacts if you need them. And of course, we very much appreciate our public servant, Commissioner Robinson, being here.
We all
I'll turn it over to Brent, who will tell you everything you need to know.
Okay, so thank you, Laura. I'm Brent Whitfield. Chinmore Associates is the engineering firm I work for. Our firm is doing District 4, which, as you know, is south of downtown, east of Dixie for the most part. Also a resident of Lake Worth. I've lived in the city for, I think it's 13 years or so. I live up in District 3, so I don't have to work on my street, but it's okay. Anyway, this, as you may remember, is the bond program line work. So there's a lot of streets on here. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's different phasing as to how the money's being spent. But the main reason I brought this out was because I wanted to point out one thing, which was the first thing we're doing is streets where we don't have to do any underground repairs. So the city staff took kind of the list of streets that were in bad shape, and then they took the list of water mains that needed replacing, sewer projects, my apologies, sewer projects that needed to be done, drainage work that needed to be done, places where there was flooding concerns, that kind of stuff, and then combined it so they made sure that we knew if we're going to do some work on that street, we didn't come back 2 years later to tear it up. So they have their 5-year plan for what was in the capital plan for utilities, for drainage, for water, for sewer. That money comes from separate, that's from the utility money, it's not from the bonds. So we voted, I voted, maybe you voted, but the city voted in favor of the bond plan, and that money is all for roadway work. The work that's going to be matched up with it for utilities is coming out of their funds. So all the money that we approved in the bond is going to roads. So when we started, in March or so, we started talking to the city about what we were going to tackle in the first year. We basically went through and grabbed up all the streets where there was no utility work. So J Street folks in the house are red. Okay. So we grabbed up all the streets in District 4 where there was only road work to be done. The city already has agreements with, I think it's 6 contractors, 5 roadway contractors that have an agreement with the city, fixed prices. So we have a menu of prices. They say, here's how much it'll cost to do, a block of street, basically, for all intents and purposes, for curb and gutter, for sidewalk, all that kind of stuff. And so, as soon as we could produce those plans, they could hand them over to the contractors and get started. So what we call them was push-button contracts. As soon as we can get it going, push the button and get the work done. So that's why we picked out these streets first. These aren't ones we're going to do underground utility work or anything. The ones in blue, we did the designs for all those already, roadway design, turned them over to the city. They brought a contractor that's coming in, and so next Tuesday, September 5th, some of these streets will start under construction.
Wow.
The ones in blue. So you'll see a variety of roadway and sidewalk and curb and gutter repairs. So when I say we're doing roads only, so we're doing the surface features. So basically what's in the city's right of way, sidewalk, curb and gutter, and roadway. So we're making those improvements. We'll be repainting the crosswalks. We'll be repainting the stop bars or putting them in if they weren't there. All anywhere that there's a sidewalk missing, we'll be putting it in, with the exception of a few locations where maybe there's a large tree and we talk to the homeowner. We made sure that every street has sidewalk on at least one side that's continuous and usable. There are some locations where there's an empty lot where we think, whoever ends up building the house there, that'll be the sidewalk that they put in, or there's a section that there's a lot of vegetation. But for the most part, everywhere we're replacing the sidewalk and repairing it. Curb and gutter, we're going through. Well, the first thing that I did with one of my support staff, we walked down every street. We've got this little application. We've got a tablet in our phones, and we're just taking pictures of everything we see, make a little note, and it loads it up into this little online tool that we can pull up and reference. So we make all those notes and bring them back, mark it down, and start putting together the plan of how we're going to fix it. So the red ones, so we already had a meeting like this for folks that live on the streets that are here in blue. Well, one thing I would like to point out is this doesn't mean that K Street is great from 3rd to 1st, because it's not. What it means is that from 3rd to 1st, if it's in the bond program, which I believe it is, it's in a different year because that one is a candidate to replace the water main. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do K from 6th to 3rd first because we don't have to dig anything up. We can get the trucks out there, make the run, fix right up to the north side of 3rd, and then cut it off. And then in 2 years or whatever, and when we've got all the water main plans or the drainage, whatever it is that we're doing underground there, we'll pick up from that point and fix the rest of the way up into downtown. We're doing a couple different types of things. So the city has these typical sections on their website. This is what, in a cross section, the street should look like. So typical street like J, there should be a 5-foot sidewalk on each side, then a curb and gutter section, what they call type F. So it's this one piece where you see the curb, and then there's a 6-inch drop, and then there's another 18 inches of gutter there, concrete, all in one piece, and then the road starts. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of that is so that when it rains on the road, it's sloped such that the water runs to the gutter and then flows down the gutter. As was pointed out earlier, and I'm sure if any of you guys have walked around the neighborhood, there's a lot of places where the sidewalk and the road are almost flush with each other.
Yeah.
And so you'll see if it starts to rain, it's going to get up on the sidewalk, and there's not good drainage, and it's just not ideal. So that's not what the city intends for the condition or for the typical section of the road. What we're doing with this plan is we have a survey that's got elevations of all these points every 100 feet or so along the street. And so we know where those locations are, and what we're going to do is try to hold the same elevation in the middle of the street, but then lower, make that slope a little steeper. So you have the same crown, but it's a little steeper coming in, so you'll still get that 6-inch reveal, they call it, between the sidewalk and the gutter line. So there are a few locations, I don't know, maybe some on J, where it's a single slab of sidewalk instead of having this little curb and gutter. What they call that is a monolithic sidewalk, so it's poured as one thing. It gets really thick right there on the edge, so if a truck drives up on it, it won't break or crack. That's one thing you see out there too a lot, is the sidewalk's maybe 4 inches thick for the whole width, and then a truck drives on it and it snaps off, it breaks off. So they shouldn't break, as they have. So this helps protect that, because that curb is really thick in the type F. Or if we repair it to match what's out there with the monolithic, it'll be really a thick concrete section right there. So either way, I guess the main point for you is we're looking just as closely at what's going on in the sidewalk and the curb, because we want to make sure that when we're done, and this was a direct quote from Jamie Brown, who's really who we're answering to in a lot of respects, do it once, do it right. So come through here and do the whole thing. Fix the sidewalks. I don't want to come back and have to deal with broken sidewalks or whatever. So we're walking down the street, taking pictures. If we see a section where there's 3 slabs of sidewalk that are all cracked up, remove and replace is what we're calling for. Now, The other thing, which I was speaking a little bit with Barbara before, this is what they call a typical section of what the road's supposed to look like. It also shows you how thick the city wants the road to be. So the top level is asphalt 1.5 inches thick. Below that is 8 inches of lime rock. And then under that is 12 inches of stabilized, like sub-base material, sand, basically around here. So when you're building a new road, you are stabilizing, like compacting that sand, and then putting in layers of the rock and compacting it as you go, and then putting in the asphalt, rolling it, another level of asphalt, rolling it. And then you have this, they call it a flexible pavement because the asphalt is really protecting the rock, making sure that the rock doesn't get worn away with rain and weather. And it's also giving your tires something to grab, some friction. And then the rock is actually what's bearing the load. If you tried to drive on 1.5 inches of asphalt just sitting on sand, it would fall through, it wouldn't work. And what you see, a lot of times when we got field data, we get pavement cores before we do the work, they cut with like a cylindrical drill bit a core out of the road. And when you have a look at that, you might find 1/2 inch of asphalt or 1 inch of asphalt sitting on 4 inches of lime rock instead of 8 inches of lime rock. So, you know, these roads could have been built 80 years ago, I don't know. So whatever it was, when they built it, they weren't building it to this standard. This is a standard that is very typical. People in Lake Worth often think, for reasons that may or may not be excusable, that the city doesn't follow any standards or that they don't build things the way everybody else. This is a very standard roadway construction requirements, specifications. We're using the same kind of specs that the city of West Palm or the county or whatever it is for our rock, for our asphalt, for all that stuff. So we're trying to make sure that, or we're making sure that we're meeting this typical section when we're putting the road back. So if we find on a street that it doesn't meet that, we recreate a section that meets the same structure, which I'll explain in a minute. But did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Like, coming down the east side of J Street, there's a 25-foot lot that's been empty for a long time and vacant, and it has a curb cut because it had a driveway from the front originally.
Good question.
But we don't want that to have a driveway from the front because we never want that to be built with a driveway in front of a 25-foot house.
Mm-hmm.
So we want that to be put back flat driveway, sidewalk. How can we address those?
So I have the plans with me right now. I don't know exactly the one, so I don't know if we called for it to be a driveway or not.
Okay.
I'm guessing we just called for sidewalk and a curb there.
Okay.
But before we leave, one of the best things that can happen for me out of this meeting is somebody comes up and says, this spot on this street, make sure that this is what happens.
Right, because that
I can do that right now.
is so not taken care of.
We'll mark it up.
Sidewalk, it won't
So
be a driveway.
what we have been
Next to
doing,
Elvira? Yeah.
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 Yeah, you want it to be a sidewalk.
what we have been doing is putting in sidewalk, and then if there is an existing driveway that has to be repaired, doesn't meet ADA standards, what have you, we will replace that as we go.
Cool.
But if there's something like you say, a curb cut to a hedge,
Right.
then we're making that curb and sidewalk. So, but just to make sure, before you leave,
I'll make a note. Okay.
let's point it out on here,
All
I'll
right.
mark it up, and we'll make sure it goes
All
in.
right, all right.
This set of plans is the 50% set, so we're going to turn in a 90% set shortly, and then 100% set, I think, at the end of September. So the schedule for this would be that in October, the city will have the plans done, and we'll be able to go to the contractor and get the agreement in place. So I don't know if it would be November when they would start construction or what on the red lines, but it would be. We're hoping that it's before the end of this year
Cool.
that the red lines are also construction. Sorry.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the kind of, from First Street up to Lake, the sidewalks do seem to be 5 feet wide.
Mm.
Oh, our drive.
South of that, they're not 5 feet wide.
No.
So are they gonna be 5 feet wide, and that means you're gonna encroach on the road a little, or where are you gonna get that?
So
5
no,
feet?
we're not. So the typical says 5, but I think we're allowing 4.5 if that's what's out
Yeah, I
there.
think we're at 4.
Yeah, I'd be
4
surprised if
sounds
we did
really
4.5.
skinny. I
You're
don't know
narrow.
if it's 4. I have to. I can't tell you by looking at it. I don't think there's any 4 foot. There might be 4.5 though. 4.5 foot wide. But we're not, we're not really going back into people's property and
Thank
messing
you.
with the fences and especially, I mean, and there's some cases where there's maybe a 8-inch or 12-inch retaining wall right there. We're trying not to touch that. We do have locations where we are going to impact some, in which case we would be replacing them. Little retaining walls. Not, I think, on J. It's like South M. Yeah, so fences, we're trying to, and I think we'll be successful with avoiding those. But if not, the onus is on the contractor to, repair or replace any kind of poles there. So, one thing I want to point out is you all live on J.
Yeah.
Okay. So, some of these places, what happens is you'll see a street where there's like cracking but no potholes or anything. So as a road ages, the asphalt, the tar in that asphalt layer starts to get brittle and starts to crack, and then water starts to find its way through. And what I was telling Barbara earlier is at that point you could actually do one of these things, the microsurfacing or the sealing or whatever, and it would be the right thing to do. But once you've gotten past that point where you start getting deformation in that rock underneath, where the water's gone through the asphalt and started to erode the structure of the pavement, then the microsurfacing, the treatments, isn't going to work. So what we're going to do in a lot of cases is we mill all that asphalt off, so it'll get down to the rock, and then we'll build the asphalt back up. If it's just cracking, we'll take just the top layer of asphalt off, so it might be still a 1/4 inch of asphalt or something there, and then build back another 1.5 inches of asphalt on top of it.
Where's all this stuff going that you're scraping up?
So it's a great question. So they have recycled asphalt material or recycled asphalt products. So they grind it, and the operation kind of looks like a little train. There's a milling machine that they can set to the depth, and it'll just grind and put it through a conveyor and dump it into a dump truck that hauls it away to their yard. Or they can use that in certain types of asphalt, put it back down, basically recycle it. But it depends on the situation. So the finished asphalt here that you're going to see out in your street isn't going to be a recycled asphalt product. But we are talking about at alleys. A lot of the places where the alley meets the road, you got just dirt that's kind of worn away. You get like a gully or something. So the plan for the alleys is to do a concrete driveway
Nice.
at that
You do
location.
in all the alleys?
Just like a driveway. Every alley we
Oh,
cross,
thank God.
we do a driveway.
Cool.
And then on the back side of the driveway, we're going to put, I think it's 10 feet. 10
Oh.
feet of that recycled asphalt. So it's not paving, but it's like little pea gravel covered with asphalt material that came from being ground up. And what's cool about that product is it's still pervious, so water still gets through it, but it's very stable and it kind of locks itself together. So it should give like a nice, you'll have the driveway and then you'll have 10 feet of the...
The problem with that, like, our garage is in the back alley that we pull in.
Right.
And so the gravel goes right into our drain and clogs it.
The sand.
And it costs us $300 to $400 a year to unclog it.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it.
So that's a problem.
Please show me where it is before we leave, and
Yeah.
we'll look at it. I know on M Street, I was like taking pictures and showing it to everybody in the city staff because you had a drain that was maybe 20 feet down from. It wasn't an alley; it was like an unpaved right of way for Fifth
Yeah.
Avenue. or
Yeah.
something. So, but it's on a hill, and M Street has like a ridge on the west side of it.
Yeah.
So the water would just wash this sand down, and then the gutter is just like 18-inch wide sand
Yeah.
pile all the way down to the drain.
413.
Like, this is a
413
mess.
Street.
So
413.
what we call
Yeah.
for in that case
South.
is that stabilized wrap. So we have the concrete driveway and then the stabilized recycled asphalt material. But I want to use your question as a transition for J Street specifically.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sure.
When you say pave the alley, does that mean from the road you're gonna pave 10 feet back from the road?
So we're not going to pave it with asphalt, but 10 feet. So you'll have the roadway, and let's say the alley is perpendicular.
Yep.
You'll have what looks like a concrete driveway, like a curb cut, and then behind that concrete driveway, you'll have 10 feet of rock
Okay.
but it'll be kind of a grayish black. It's old asphalt.
But the rest of
ground
it
up.
will stay as
And
is.
then after that 10 feet, it'll be what it is now. So sand or dirt or whatever rock it is now.
Okay.
So on J Street, there's just this weird, which you mentioned, deformation in the road where it's like all the way down is like a straight line rut. Right? And I was actually showing this to this contractor, Advanced Paving, and I was like, how do you think this failed? Like, what happened? It goes for blocks, you know? So whether or not we totally understand, you know, various people have things they think of why it did that. What we're going to do on J Street is, it's called cold in place recycling. So it's going to look like a train where you have the front truck is going to be that grinder, but instead of just grinding the top off, it's going to grind down like 8 or 10 inches into the ground. So it's going to take the asphalt and the rock, grind it all up, put it back into a hopper behind it that's going to mix it with some asphalt and then lay it down so it'll look like an asphalt, but it's going to be the base. So on J Street, instead of having this lime rock base, we're going to make a base that's recycled asphalt mixed with some cement. They do it on a lot of FDOT projects. They do it in a lot of places. You basically, you know, I'm excited to see it because I've heard a lot about it, but we haven't done it here. It's a product where it drives through the street at, you know, a really slow pace, and it's basically taking a failed base and asphalt and grinding it up, mixing it with cement and additional asphalt material, and putting back a base that is much stronger.
Cool.
So what you'll end up with, so that whole thing will be done, and you should be able to drive on it, but it would be like this base material. Then they'll come back and put an 1.5 inch lift of the asphalt like you see everywhere. So
Not shell rock asphalt.
right, so what will happen is when you're done, it would actually be, you'll have the regular 1.5 inch asphalt just like they would have on, you know, in 4th Avenue South when we do the repair. But under that, because J has been such a failed base, there's going to be another 4.5 or 5 inches of like additional asphalt. That's a different kind of mix. And what you get when you do this is there's this thing called the structural number, where you take the strength of a rock and take the strength of rock and the strength of asphalt times the thicknesses of each, and you say this is how strong this street is, like a 2.1 or. So we're going to make sure that we have the same structural number at least, but instead of the rock, we'll have that a new base of asphalt and then the asphalt lift on top.
Cool.
And hopefully, what I'm really hoping is, besides the strength, that hopefully it's not quite as invasive. Because the other option is we rip out like 8 inches of everything, and then, you know, block by block, we build it up from the bottom where we're dumping rock, we're rolling that, compacting it, another layer of rock, and that just takes a long time. As described to me, you know, we shut your block down for the day, and when you come back, there's this layer of dry asphalt base that you can drive on, and then we come back another day and do the final lift. So I'm really hoping
So
it's
we'll just take a couple days?
no, well, the first thing is going to be they're going to tear up all the curb and gutter and sidewalk that they need to do. Because that asphalt thing, when they do that, that should be the last thing. They want to pave right up to fresh, clean, new curb and gutter, or maybe not new curb and gutter, but intact curb and gutter. Because you don't want to pave the street and come back and fix the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So they're going to come, first thing they're going to do, and that may look a little rough, is tear out sidewalk, make concrete forms, you know, start pouring concrete, all that stuff.
Oh, we'll be so flippin' excited.
Do all the sidewalk curb and gutter. Yeah.
High fives
Do you think
and
it'll be like a week that we won't be able to park on our street?
So I don't know exactly. And a lot of things, the way the relationship between an engineer and a contractor works, the more information I tell them, like you have to be on here from only 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. or something, the more expensive he's going to be. So
Yeah.
I can't really tell him too much about how to do it, other than you must do it to these standards and these quality remarks. And then, you know, obviously there's times a day and things like that. But we're going to work with them. We're going to have staff in the field, and the city's going to have staff in the field that are making sure that it's going as smoothly as possible and coordinating with folks about accessing their property and all that sort of thing.
Sounds good.
And if you work at night, too bad.
Well, I mean,
It's gonna
night?
be noisy during the day.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
oh,
you're not
yeah,
gonna be
if you
able
work
to
at
sleep
night,
too well. Yeah.
Machine probably, yeah.
So I do want to get individual comments on the plans, like show me where the stuff is. But before we do that, we have the one interactive activity. So this is really, it should not be the neighborhood road program for tonight's meeting. It should be the J Street.
Hey, and K, don't forget K.
Oh, sorry,
K
NK Street.
represented.
So
Sucks.
oh, that's funny. Okay. So
Truth.
everybody gets some stickers, and you get to put them on what you like the best.
We love interactive.
And one thing I'll say, so bump outs is on here. Are you guys
I like
familiar
a
with
bump out.
Okay.
I love a good bump
So
out.
our current plan has bump outs at
The entire J Street,
on
right?
J at 6th, at 4th, at 3rd.
Yeah, 'cause that's where they speed to get to 95.
Yeah, bump
Yeah.
out, slow people down.
So we have bump outs currently shown.
That's awesome.
Here. Oh, not on 5th, because 5th isn't our street.
Yeah.
So at each of the intersections going north, there's a bump out.
Cool.
So the bump out is concrete curb, and then inside of it is a stamped concrete, looks like bricks or something. And it's off the curb and gutter, so there's room for the water to kind of get through. But it comes out, I think it's...
We're not gonna get a tree, it's not gonna have a tree.
Like 2 feet.
There are not going to be any Good. trees. It basically takes up the width of the street parking.
Cool.
I can tell
That'll
you.
slow people
That's like
down.
on 6th Street
Yeah, I
right
think so.
now, right?
Yeah, on 6, they got bump outs
It's
on 6.
very similar to what's on 6, but 6
Yeah.
has trees. This wouldn't have any trees. One of the things we talked about with trees is like sight distances and stuff, whether you'd be able to see well at those intersections. There has been people that have talked about maybe coming back later with a grant or their own neighborhood association and cutting it out and
flowers or
putting a
something.
tree or something. That'll be up to you guys. Maybe at some later date, but as far as this project, when we're done, it's going to be a hardscaped bump out for the purposes of helping you with traffic. Now on K, maybe not you, but other people that came to the meeting asked specifically for speed humps. So they were residents of K that wanted speed humps, and kind of what we do is,
Yeah, they talked about tables somewhere.
yeah,
But
let
like,
me
can
see.
citizens, like, so citizens came to one meeting and can ask for speed humps, and they're gonna get speed humps? Tom, or we want stop signs?
So they are humps. There's
we don't.
one like this
Yeah, we do.
on
We wanna stop people.
Stop signs.
N Street. If you go 6th, like you're going to Federal and you turn left on N, there's a speed hump on
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if you're familiar. So that, something just like that will be on J.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, on
K.
K. On K.
Where on K?
Sorry, on K. But just, it's not shown on J right now because no one asked for it on J.
We want
No
stop
one
signs.
talked
I think
about
we
it.
get stop signs and
Stop
bump
signs.
outs. We're
Okay.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't
Where do
need-
you want a stop sign now?
Third. So that people can't.
Those are where the
Yeah,
bump
3
outs are going to be, but I'm not doing
But the bump
stop
outs are
signs.
gonna be
Oh.
there.
Yeah.
Right, but people get to speed from Lake Avenue to 6th Avenue, they have 6 blocks to build up speed.
Oh, yeah, they
If they get a stop sign on 3rd on every block, they have to stop their car 3 blocks into the process and start again, so they're not going 60 when they hit our block.
Right.
I just wish we had a commissioner here that we could talk
Yeah, we
to.
could
How
talk
would
to
you
about
how would
stop
you describe these speed humps on South A Street? Is there a
So
definition?
the speed humps, I can tell you, they're actually not tables. I can show you what they look like. It's not a great.
Well, but there's several varieties of speed bumps.
Yeah, it's 12 feet long, and
Three
it's a
lights.
slow kind of rise and fall, and it's got these triangles on it for as far as the.
South A Street, is that a specific, does that have a specific
Oh,
name?
South A Street.
That's got a table.
That's a
It's
table.
That's a table.
Yeah, that's a table. The table is where you go up and then it's flat and then back down. This is speed hump, and actually, if you go to the city's website, they have a typical like details of what they want around the city for contractors and whatever for reference. That's where we got this. The speed hump is on that too. So it's really if Public Services, Public Works decides that a speed hump needs to go in, they do it with their own staff or a contractor. This is the one that they use, so we're just using what the city uses from their kind of menu.
Are there gonna be more of these meetings about District 4 before it all starts, or is this the last one?
So this is the last
L
one.
Street, people are gonna flip out when K Street gets speed humps, it's gonna flip out L and
I
M
can
Street.
assure you somebody's not gonna
I'm telling you, there's
like
gonna
what
be
they get.
mutiny
Always somebody
on the
that
boundary when
Because they don't
that
want them,
happens.
because they don't want them, or
They
what?
probably, some are gonna want them and some are gonna not want them, like the whole
Should go to
street light thing,
meetings.
because we live in Lakewood.
So L
They're
Street,
gonna flip out.
L Street, looking at this map from the bond program here. L
L
Street,
Street gets pretty speedy too.
They all do, Carmen, they really all do, anything going southbound from the downtown restaurants, they drop beer,
so
they
L
drop
Street
everything
from
else.
1st to 3rd is on a later year
Right.
of this program. But when it comes to something like speed humps or even the bump outs or what have you, those could be added in at a later date, even if it's not on the bond program, just by the city's public services or through the push button contracts outside of the bond program.
Right.
So there's still time to do that. The one thing that's a little tricky about, I think you raised a really valid point. We're only working inside the bounds of where the bond program streets are. So if we do a traffic calming device, stop signs, speed bumps, whatever, something that makes J Street not so friendly, and then the driver moves over to a street that's not in the bond program, we haven't touched yet.
Right.
So it's important for the city and the Public Works Department to be cognizant of, and they're familiar with this. We've been talking about it, the fact that some of those impacts could spread elsewhere. But those features aren't the high dollar, those aren't hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Those are things they could do with.
But like
with their
talking about the stop signs,
annual
instead of taking one block in our neighborhood and putting speed humps on it, which is gonna push everything to every other block like
Mhm.
you've talked about, if you did something like at Third Avenue and, put a stop sign
One
in
of the
each.
things that, we have started doing, because we've got the same comments from the districts, for the one-way streets that, we go 6, 7 blocks without any stop signs, is we're looking at those to install stop signs, so exactly what you're talking about, so there's not more than, so you can't go more than 3 blocks.
Right.
Without having a stop.
Perfect, that would really make a difference, right? And I don't think the
That's-
speed
that's
humps we need,
something
quite
that-
honestly.
That's something that
Yeah.
public services can
Yeah.
actually
We
do on
need
a
a hump.
regional basis outside of this program.
Right.
We can implement it where, as Brent was saying, in these segments that we're doing, but we can also go back and take a look in the same area, in the neighbor areas.
It'd be nice to do it at the same time that the roads got done though, because all of a sudden you had these nice, beautiful roads and people go, wow.
And when is the last time District 4,
You know,
when is the last time District 4 had a major project done? I really, I lived in District 4
I've
for
seen
30
pictures.
years.
Well, Barbara, we weren't around that long.
I know, but I mean, like, seriously, so
I think
like.
there has
we-
been some
like-
water main.
Barbara, it was
replacement.
1956.
It was,
Yes, we put a water main in last year.
We're still waiting for
Okay.
Second Avenue.
Okay, as we watch these other projects, and Mary Lindsay was on about the curb and gutter up there, and I said, Mayor, I gotta tell you, frustration has topped out with me today on this. Quit saying how wonderful the new curbs are when I have school children walking in the street to an elementary school.
Yeah.
Please, please,
South
please,
grade,
you
yeah.
can't, I can't,
Oh, I got you.
not trying to be mean to College Park.